You know, when I walked into the green room, and I'm just going to say Attorney Mosby, he's still my attorney.
And she still is an attorney, by the way.
Yes, Bill. Yes, Bill.
She still has a license. She sits here as a lawyer.
You know, I thought I was going to see a different face. I thought I was going to see a little bit of sadness. I thought I was going to see tiredness, stress. But when I walked in, man, you was just beautiful, lighting up. You don't look like what you've been going through the last 2 years. But I think I would be wrong to not ask, how are you doing? And not just you, if you feel like speaking about it, how are your kids doing? I just have a heart for kids.
No, and I appreciate the question. I think when you said 2 years, this has been longer than 2 years.
Has it?
It has. I mean, I think what Monique touched upon is that I've been under attack since the moment I walked down the steps of the War Memorial and announced charges against 6 police officers for the death of a 25-year-old Black man by the name of Freddie Carlos Gray Jr., who was unconstitutionally arrested, placed into a metal wagon, head first, feet shackled, and when his spine was partially severed in the back of that wagon, his pleas for medical attention were ignored. These individuals, the FOP, they put me on the magazine, The Wolf That Lurks. They've been coming for me and individuals since that time, coming for my law license. And so more recently, as Monique has already indicated, being under the ire of the former president, right, who said I needed to prosecute myself. There were instances where 2 months before this investigation started, myself, along with Larry Krasner, who's the Philadelphia district attorney, called then President Trump out and basically said, you do what you're doing in Oregon and you start kidnapping people, you bring that to Baltimore, we're going to prosecute you. And 2 months later, they opened an investigation into me. So they've combed my taxes, my campaign contributions, my charitable donations. They've interviewed my hairdresser. They've gone to my children's dance instructor. FBI has knocked on my neighbors' doors at 5 a.m. to interrogate them, right? So they've created an environment of hostility and isolation that affected my election. I lost my election. I lost my reputation. I lost my career. I've lost my marriage, a relationship that I was in for 25 years. And I'm now in financial ruin as a result of these allegations in which, as has already been pointed out, this was not a hardship financial standard. This was an adverse financial consequence, something that Monique has already said has never been legally defined. And so, even the witness that got up on the stand and said, all I needed to do was suffer a $50 adversity during COVID to be able to withdraw my own retirement savings. That's what I was looking to do to build wealth for me and my family. And so when you ask, how am I'm first and foremost incredibly humbled. I'm so humbled by, even in the midst of the storm, I feel like God has still been sending earth angels into my life.
Right.
And because of the environment of hostility and isolation and villainization that has been brought upon me, so many people that I loved unconditionally, as I've stated before, showed me the conditions of their love. And so to now be in a position where you have 14 civil rights organizations understanding the injustice that I'm facing, to be in a position where you have thousands of people signing a petition in support of what I'm going through, it's overwhelming. To have people like Monique and Angela Rye and some of my local supporters who are diehard advocates and understand the injustice of what I'm facing, it's humbling. And I know that it's only God. This has brought me to the lowest point. These systems, they filed an emergency petition to take my law license. Something that they have never done, even before I was convicted. Sentenced and convicted in the second case. And when I think about just all that I've lost as a result of this, even through the storm, I can still feel nothing but gratitude because God is still there. He's still holding me up. He's still bringing people into my life to strengthen me and covering me and covering my girls. My children are 13 and 15 years old. And just yesterday, again, something that's been impacted is my 25-year relationship. My ex-husband lost his election, and my little girls came into my room and they were devastated. And I was like, well, you know, I didn't even know what to say, right? Like, you know, God is with us. You have to have faith. You can't lose faith. And they broke down and they were basically like, Mom, I just don't want to happen to Dad what happened to you. And I said, well, what do you mean? An election is not everything, right? Mommy's fighting for liberty.
Right.
And they said, no, I don't want to see Dad go through the depression that you went through.
Wow.
I don't want to see Dad go through, they didn't say isolation, but to be alone the way that you were. And it really brought it back to the ultimate sacrifice, right? Like when I think about it, my two little girls having two public servants who want to give back to their community all this time, we took time away from them. And it's not enough that the government is broken me from my career and my election and, you know, my reputation and all that I've lost. They're still looking to take my sole asset. They're still making a recommendation for me to go to prison. And when I think about that, right, for me accessing my own money, for me trying to build wealth for myself and my children, the only ones that are really going to be suffering are my little girls. But at the same time, he's covered them. God has covered them because I was saying and remarking before, my little girl just had recently a cotillion. And I didn't know, because I made it a point in the first trial not to kind of try to shield them from going into court and being away from the press and the media. And then, you know, I felt like I needed to show them what strength looks like in the face of adversity, what faith looks like in the face of adversity. So I made it a point to bring them to the trial, and they came with me. And at the cotillion, it was a surprise to me when my little girl was announced, and she said that she wants to, when she grows up, be a lawyer, and not just a lawyer, but a prosecutor.
Wow.
So I bring this all back to say I'm grateful, because even through the storm, God is still covering my babies and covering me in a way that only he can.
That is God. Cotillions. I remember the cotillions.
She won the cotillion.
She won the cotillions.
She won.
I won the botillion, so I know.
Did you?
Yes, ma'am. That's the days, but
Correct.
I'm getting old. Lord Jesus. I want to ask you this question because you fought hard. And throughout all your interviews, I never really heard you answer this question. And it's a great question, I think. Why? Like, why? What made you want to be who you are today and then fight for the people?
So I think it's a calling.
Okay.
To be honest with you, my family, I come from 4 generations of police officers. My grandfather was one of the founding members of the first Black police organization in Massachusetts. He was part of one of the community policing patrol units, the first Black patrol unit, the Soul Patrol. And my grandfather, my uncles, my mom, my father, all of them were police officers. So law enforcement was very much ingrained within me. But when I was 14 years old, we were very close-knit family, lived right across the street from my grandparents, and my cousin lived right next door. But my cousin, we grew up like brother and sister. And he was 17, I was 14. And he was killed right outside of my home in broad daylight when he was mistaken as a neighborhood drug dealer. They were looking for a kid named Dion, and his name was Duran. And so if it wasn't for a neighbor who cooperated with police, testified in court, my family wouldn't have received any sort of justice. But this was really my first introduction to the criminal justice system. And seeing my cousin with all these dreams, all these aspirations, who's now going to a grave, but the individual responsible for his death was also 17 years old. I said, what is this system, and how could we have gotten to that young man before he elected to take my cousin's life? And so that tragedy is what spawned my passion to want to reform the criminal justice system. And so from, you know, the time that I was in high school and then into law school, like my friends were making $40,000 a summer. And I'm volunteering at the U.S. Attorney's Office in Boston, the U.S. Attorney's Office in Suffolk, in D.C., the Suffolk County Homicide Unit. And then for a year, I was a student criminal defense attorney because I wanted a well-rounded perspective about the criminal justice system. And what I realized is that the best way to be able to reform this system, a system that has disproportionately impacted people of color, right, and bases their business model off the backs of Black and brown people, the best way to be able to reform it is from within.
Yeah.
Prosecutors are the most important stakeholder in the criminal justice system. We are the ones who decide who's going to be charged, what they're going to be charged with, what sentence recommendations we're going to make. We decide if somebody gets into the criminal justice system in the first place. And so that is an awesome amount of power and discretion to be able to not disrupt, but to, I would say, change the system from within.
Yeah. No, I love that, to hear that story. 'Cause I've always wondered that. I was like, man, you went so hard. I mean, there had to be something behind it. And now I understand why.